The city of Cabolton, the seat of power for House Corbin, their capital city, so to speak. Capturing this city is the ultimate objective for the League. It was only a matter of time before an invasion was attempted. But from where? House Corbin rolled out a starborn assault into the Shivermoors. The routes to the capital are too few and could easily be blocked. They doubted the League would take that course of action. With the capture of Rutherford, the House Corbin players were a little less worried about the obvious and most straightforward way to attack the capital. This left the Cobalt Flats as the next most vulnerable location to an attack. House Corbin's strategy was defense in depth. If the League attacked here, House Corbin would keep rotating units to the front in a war of attrition, sort of like their conveyor belt of doom strategy that never came to fruition. House Corbin's forces only needed to hold on long enough to win. You know, I listen in on the players' conversations during their planning sessions. A tiny GM fly on the wall. Yep, that's me. Anyway, I noticed how the House Corbin players never realized how close they were to the League invading the Hazi Peninsula. They had identified the need to hold Whiteloft and the Easter Witch Inkroth corridor, so they were preparing for battles there. They also realized that it would be a good idea to build a defense towers at Runefer, but it never seemed to cross their mind that the League was very close to executing the Starving Plan. Oh well, it's our little omniscient secret. Anyway, let's get into Strategic Turn 3. House Corbin has the initiative and has the priority for launching attacks this turn. For the command actions, both sides spun up 2 combat air patrols and 1 recon flight each. The League's recon flight flew along the Cabolton northern coast, scouting for House Corbin's defenses. House Corbin's recon flight flew along the coast of Azul Heath to look for evidence of an invasion force. There is no specific rule for this, but as the GM, I like to stir the pot and sprinkle in some chaos. So I told each side that their spy plane saw the enemy spy plane crossing the Azul Strait, and, strictly following standard operating procedures for communications with the enemy, each pilot gave the other pilot the Digitus Medius salute as they flew past one another. I left that nugget of knowledge to fester in the players' minds. For this turn, the League didn't deploy their Spec Ops team to harass the occupation forces in Sapphire Bay. Instead, 2 teams of Pathfinders were sent to establish docile sites for dropships in the town of Crimsonville, and the other Pathfinder was deployed to Alpine Cone, where the 4th Provisional Guard was garrisoned. The plot thickens. What is the League cooking? House Corbin did not utilize their operations officer this turn. However, they did deploy their Corps of Engineers to Runefer, and attached the unit to the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment. It looks like the League players were right. House Corbin plans to build defense towers at the logistics hub during the admin turn that's coming up soon. With the command phase complete, let's get into the action phase. House Corbin will move their forces first. First thing that House Corbin did was repair the 2nd Battalion in Snowmont after its failed defense of Whiteloft. The League repositioned the 2nd Provisional Guard from Thunderhall to Crimsonville, taking up the old position of the 3rd Cluster, which is now occupying Whiteloft. House Corbin ordered another repair action for the 2nd Battalion, and the player also reorganized his 1st Met Company, moving the Rifleman Lance to replace the decimated Warhammer Lance. Reorganizing units organic to the battalion is allowed, except for Patreon units. We keep those mercenary folks in 1 unit. The League took their next action, and the 2nd Provisional Guard changed places with the 3rd Cluster, and is now occupying Whiteloft. For House Corbin, we jump back to the Lambridge area, in which the 4th Battalion of the 1st Regiment leaves the city of Cabolton from the urban district of Slithershade to the town of Covendocks. The League's next action is to take the transport action. Using Pathfinders and dropships, the 3rd Cluster is pulled out of the Hazi Mountains Theater and lands in Heavy by Starport in Indigoville City. This transport action was not contested by House Corbin's combat air patrols. House Corbin, still using their actions in the Lambridge Theater, had their 2nd and 4th Battalions switch positions. The League's next action was a transport action. This time, the 4th Provisional Guard, using Pathfinders, lifts off via dropships from Alpine Colm and lands at the Pathfinders at Crimson Will. House Corbin, still wanting to preserve their combat air patrols for the coming battles, did not contest this transport action. House Corbin's next action was again in the Lambridge region. The 1st Regiment's HQ moved from Covendocks to the forward position of Rutherford. This brought the regiment's artillery and air defense weapons closer to the Chupacabra's stronghold at Limestead. The Chupacabra saw the move of the enemy's HQ. The player wanted to move her HQ forward as well, but first the player wanted to maximize her repair action, and therefore she ordered a repair on the 4th Battalion. For House Corbin's last action, the player pulled the 1st Battalion back from Easterwitch to Luna Mill. Their job of threatening the Hazi Valley was over, Their new job is to hold the Luna Mill Inkroth corridor. As for the last action of the League, it was given to the Chupacabra player, who moved her HQ from the fortifications in Mortarbourne to Pike Post. This way, her regiment's artillery and air defense weapons are also in range of Limestead. For the combat phase, House Corbin launched 2 attacks. The 2nd Battalion, with the Patreon unit of Old Gristle's gunslingers leading the attack, launches a counterattack at Whiteloft. And as expected, House Corbin's 4th Regiment attacks the Chupacabra's 3rd Regiment at Limestead. This battle report will resolve the battle in Whiteloft. The next one will resolve the battle over the stronghold in Limestead. So without further ado, this is the 2nd Battle of Whiteloft. Welcome back to Whiteloft. The last battle took its toll on this once-upon-a-time boomtown, but its logistics hub is still intact, and House Corbin can't allow this town to remain in the hands of the League. With all that dropship action, House Corbin wasn't sure who they would be facing here, but House Corbin felt that the 2nd Regal Battalion was up for the task. The attacking force is led by the mercenary unit Old Gristle's Gunslingers. The backstory of this mercenary unit is as mysterious and sordid as the mercenaries themselves. At high noon, these mech warriors sauntered into the Old Duck Saloon in the seedier parts of Cobolton City. Baron Corbin took one look and he knew he needed this company of gunslingers. Captain John Hayter, the Old Gristle himself, with a tip of his hat, accepted the title of Count of Azul Harbor. My apologies to Captain John Hayter, Count of Azul Harbor, but we had to use a few proxies for his merc company. The Command Lance has a Devastator, a Gunslinger, a Gladiator, and a Mad Cat Mark II. The Striker Lance has a Charger, a Manteuffel attack tank, a Crusader, and an Iron Cheetah. The Recon Lance has a Fireball, a Hunchback, a Centurion, and a Crab. The reorganized 1st Mech Company has an Atlas Lance, an attached Rifleman Lance, and a Fire Lance with 2 Fafnirs and 2 Stalkers. Filling in the infantry support role is the 2nd Heavy Infantry Company. And last but not least, filling in the Special Lance attachment is the Star Gator Corps, Viscountess of Easterwich, the Bog Witches, who received a hefty amount of repairs since their previous engagement. However, the Grasshopper still has critical damage to its engines, so it will take on heat if the mech fires its weapons. But the players stated, and I quote, "The Bog Witches are riverine experts. They fight in the drink." I'll leave you fine folks to interpret what that means. The Defenders is the League's 2nd Provisional Guard, the troops that are meant to remain garrisoned on this planet once it's wrestled away from House Corbin's grip. They are designed to fight and defend in towns, so we'll see if they can withstand the might of House Corbin's resolve or not. The defense force is comprised of a provisional trinary with a striker star, battle star, and a support star. Players' favorite color is forest green, so these clan mechs are wearing green boots for the win. The provisional guard's other maneuver unit is the battle trinary, which is comprised of a star of hover tanks with 2 Condor heavy tanks and 3 Drillson hover tanks. The 2nd Heavy Tank Star has 2 Demolishers and 3 Von Luckners. The player seemed to have misplaced one of her Von Luckners, so we needed to use a proxy. The 3rd star of the Battle Trinary is comprised of 5 Behemoth Heavy Battle Tanks. For infantry support, the player has an Assault Infantry Company with 2 Cat V-19s and 4 Assault Infantry Squads. However, for this battle, she will not deploy the 2 Cat V-19s. For the Special Unit attachment, the player opted to bring her Provisional Security Star. Since this battle is taking place in an occupied location, we will not start the battle with a skirmish to determine momentum. Instead, the defender will deploy all their forces on their side of the map, within 3 inches of a building or fortified position. The attacker deploys their forces off-map, along the edge of their deployment. Once forces are placed on the map, we then place the control points. Remember, after turn 1, we will roll a d6 to determine which of these control points will be in play and capturable. One thing to note, capturing the control points is not as simple as just placing a unit on top of the control point. Not all units are equal in how they capture points. For example, the Big Scary Atlas earns 1 tactical point if he's within 8 inches of the point. If within 4 inches or less, he will earn 2 tactical points. However, infantry earn 3 tactical points, but they have to be within 2 inches of the point. Anyway, enough about them rules and tactics. Let's get into the second Battle of Whiteloft. But before we do, we want to notify you all on a noticeable notifying notification of a new notable noble, taking up the noteworthy noble cause of supporting the channel, and has thus been denoted as a notable noble. Thank you, Faye O, for your noble support. You have our undying gratitude. Since both sides committed their combat air patrols to this battle, then the battle kicks off with dogfighting in the skies. The difference between the two rolled resulted in 100% dogfighting, with neither side having an opportunity to attack the ground forces. From the dogfighting, each side had 2 craft take 1 damage each. Back to the ground battle. Since House Corbin is the attacker, then they have the initiative for the first turn. The League forces will need to move and shoot first. Provisional Guard activated their battle tank trinary. The hover tank Star moves out over the lake, using the destroyed water processor as cover. The behemoth tank Star moves forward, squeezing their formation into that narrow pass between the road signs and the building. The Demolishers and the Von Luckners ground move to the edge of the highway, scanning for House Corbin's forces on the horizon. For House Corbin's turn, the player activated their Bog Witches, and the Lance jumps into the cover of the woods right at the lake's edge. The League activates her Assault Infantry, who hold position inside the buildings. House Corbin sends in Old Gristle's Gunslingers. The Recon Lance shifted north to support the Bog Witches to hold the north flank. The Striker Lance advanced forward, with the Iron Cheetah and the Manteuffel tank taking cover at the communications relay station, and the rest of the Lance taking cover behind that house. The Command Lance advances forward into the south. The Gladiator takes cover at the water tower, and the rest of the Lance takes cover at that house. Not sure how House Corbin plans to deploy their heavy mech company, the Provisional Guard activates their Security Star, and they stand still. Not taking the bait, House Corbin activates his infantry company instead of his heavy mech company. The Battle Armor Infantry jumps forward into the opening, but keeping a patch of trees between their platoon and their enemy. The rest of the Mechanized Infantry advance forward. The vehicles move forward with one platoon taking cover at the water tower, and the other heading south to help contest control of Capture Point C. The League activates their last unit, the Provisional Battle Mech Trinary. The Striker Star advances into the woodline, where so many mechs were destroyed in the last battle. The Support Star rearranges their position to better hold the container yard. The Battle Star's Behemoth and the Hunchback 2C advance to the traffic circle, taking cover behind that road sign. The rest of the Star backs up into cover, with the Marauder and Warhammer taking cover in the woods. From this position, they can see down the highway to Control Point C in support of the Behemoth and Hunchback at the traffic circle. House Corbin activates their last unit, the Heavy Mech Company. The Atlas Lance advances forward behind the Gunslinger's company. The Rifleman Lance jumps into cover out of the neighborhood. And the Fire Lance finds cover at the edge of that small factory. With movement complete, we go into the shooting phase. The League will shoot first. The Von Luckners, Demolishers, and the entire Striker and Security Star open fire on the brave Gladiator. Target number ranged between 9 and 11. In the end, the water tower was destroyed, and the Gladiator took 7 hits to its armor. That's a tough and lucky mech. Next, the Battle Star take aim at one of the Rifleman mechs in the neighborhood and opens fire. The target number ranged between 9 and 11, and the Rifleman was hit, dealing 10 damage to the mech. This wiped out all of its armor and most of its structure, leaving just 1 structure point left. This also caused critical damage to the mech's weapons. Seeing an opportunity to take out mounted infantry, the Behemoth Tank Star opens fire on the Mechanized Infantry platoons. Target number was an 8, and under that heavy barrage from the Behemoths, the Deputy Infantry Fighting Vehicle was destroyed, and the infantry unit on board was unable to evacuate in time. The Support Star in the container yard and the entire Hover Tank Star opens fire on the Grasshopper at the edge of the woods. Target number was an 8, and the Grasshopper was very lucky, but it was still hit with 5 points of damage to its armor. Recall that this mech still had critical damage from the previous battle that has not yet been repaired. And finally, the Provisional Guard called in artillery on the severely damaged Rifleman and nailed it, taking its last point of structure and destroying the mech. However, the mech will still be able to shoot back this turn. House Corbin can now return fire. The Bog Witches open fire on the linebacker with a target number of 8. They hit with 8 points of damage, wiping out its armor and inflicting structural damage, which caused critical damage to the mech's movement. The Gunslinger's Recon Lance and part of the Fire Lance opens fire on the Behemoth Clan mech. target number ranged between 7 and 10. They hit, dealing 6 points of damage to its armor. The Fafnir also blew up my side. That was rude. The rest of the gunslingers and the heavy mech company split their fire between the two demolisher tanks. Target number was a 7. One tank took 11 points of damage and the other took 12, and they were both destroyed. The House Corbin player called in his artillery on that damaged linebacker, and the round found its mark, dealing another structural damage, leaving only one structure point left. This also caused critical damage to the mech's engine. And this brings turn 1 to a close. House Corbin lost a mech, one vehicle, and one squad of mechanized infantry, whereas the Provisional Guard only lost 2 tanks. Since this is now the end of turn 1, we roll to see which control point will become the key terrain that needs to be captured. And it is a 6, therefore all 3 control points are now key terrain and are eligible to be captured by the enemy. Let's get into turn 2. The air battle continues, but this time, House Corbin's forces had the edge. 50% of the forces are still locked into dogfighting, with one of House Corbin's assets taking 2 damage and only inflicting 1 damage on the League's aerospace asset. However, this bought time for the rest of the Eagles to make an airstrike on the linebacker, destroying it. Poor mech. First he gets shot up, then gets hit by artillery, and now he caught a missile with his face. It's a rough day for that mech warrior. The League won the initiative. House Corbin will need to move and shoot first. The gunslingers are activated. The recon lance advances forward, but stays behind woods for cover. The striker lance advances forward on both sides of the highway, and the command lance moves into the neighborhood. The League activates the battle tank trinary. The von Luckners move across the road into cover. Their mission is to take down the gunslinger's gladiator. The hover tanks move forward just to keep their TMM up. The Star wants to threaten the northern flank with potential hook maneuver and get in behind the advancing forces of House Corbin. The behemoth tanks are slow monsters. They edge their way onto the road just north of the key terrain at the traffic circle. House Corbin activates his heavy mech company. The rifleman lance jumps into cover just to the western side of the neighborhood. Not sure if jumping this close to a von Luckner tanks is a good idea or not, but we'll find out. The fire lance advances forward, taking cover behind the communication relay station. The Atlas lance sprints. Yes, an Atlas can sprint, and I imagine that it would be a frightening experience to witness in person. Seeing an opportunity to get some free shots on sprinting Atlas mechs, the security star is activated and ground moves into cover near the road. Just like the last battle, the bog witches find themselves jumping into the lake, using the water as both cover and a means to keep their mechs cool. The League activates their infantry and order them to hold their positions. House Corbin activates their heavy infantry company as well. The mechanized infantry try to regroup and break line of sight with the League forces behind that house. The battle armor infantry platoon jumps forward, moving in on the apartments. The League activates the battle mech trinary. The striker star advances right up to the woods with the rifleman lance. I imagine it's going to get scary in there. Battle lance does a general advance into the center of the map, squaring off against the gunslinger striker lance and House Corbin's fire lance. The support lance also advances to the other side of the port, bringing their weapons to bear on the bog witches. House Corbin may have blundered. Sacrificing shooting in order to quickly advance his Atlas lance gave the green light to the League to advance their mechs aggressively forward. We'll see if this blunder will cause House Corbin to fail to take control of Whiteloft or not. Anyway, movement is complete. Let's get into the shooting phase. House Corbin will shoot first. The bog witches open fire on the Night-Jeer in the container yard. The Thunderbolt and the Catapult both overheat their weapons to do additional damage and let the cool water of the lake dissipate that heat. Target number was a 9, and the mech was hit with 13 points of damage, which was more than enough to destroy the mech. That mech was just too dangerous at short-medium range. It had to go. The fireball didn't have many available targets, so it fired at the Black Lantern with its energy weapons. The target number was an 8, and it hit with 2 damage to the Black Lantern. The rest of the gunslingers' recon lance, their striker lance, and the gunslingers of the command lance, as well as House Corbin's fire lance, split their fire between the behemoth mech and the hunchback. Target numbers ranged between 7 and 8, and each of the mechs took enough damage to be destroyed. That was a significant loss for the Provisional Guard. However, those mechs will still be able to shoot back this turn. Ignoring the Provisional Guard's approaching Striker Star, the Rifleman Lance and the remainder of the Gunslinger's Command Lance split their fire between two of the deadly von Luckner tanks. Target number ranged between 7 and 9. One of the tanks was destroyed, the other took 6 points of damage to its armor. Since the tank is a vehicle, it needs to take a motive check, which it failed, and its movement was reduced by 2. The infantry vehicles didn't have line of sight and the Atlas Lance sprinted, so none of those units opened fire. Instead, artillery was called down on the damaged von Luckner, but it missed and hit the road. The League can now return fire. The Black Lantern focused on taking down the Grasshopper, while the rest of the Support Star and the Hover Tank Star opened fire on the Bog Witch's Viper. Target number ranged between 8 and 9. The Viper took 6 hits, but the Grasshopper was completely destroyed. The Battle Mech Star and the Behemoth Tank Star all opened fire on the Iron Cheetah. Target number was between 8 and 9. However, under all that withering firepower, the Iron Cheetah surprisingly survives with just 2 structure points left. However, it still suffered critical damage to its fire control. The Striker Star lined up their sights on the Rifleman and opened fire. The target number was 7 for the mechs at close range and a 9 for the mechs across the road. And they all hit to a varying degree, scoring 7 hits that stripped away all the Rifleman's armor. But one of the hits was a critical hit, which caused damage to the mech's weapons. Next up, the Security Star and the von Luckners opened fire on one of the sprinting Atlas mechs. Target number for the tanks was an 8 and a 7 for the mechs. And they hit, dealing 12 damage to the mech, wiping out all of its armor and causing 2 structural damage. This necessitated a critical check, and it was movement. Apparently, this mech is a magnet for bullets. This is the same mech that was shot up in the last battle, and all its armor and structure was repaired at great cost. That's got to be nerve-wracking for the mech warrior who's piloting this thing. The Provisional Guard called in artillery on the severely damaged Iron Cheetah, and it hit, taking 1 more structural point and causing critical damage to the mech's engine. This brings turn 2 to a close. House Corbin lost a mech and took a lot of damage. However, the Provisional Guard lost 3 mechs and a tank. Ouch! Let's get into turn 3. Turn 3 opens with the battle in the sky, and House Corbin prevailed again. Both sides are still locked into 50% of their forces dogfighting, but House Corbin had a difference high enough to conduct a heavy strike. An aerospace asset targeted the damaged von Luckner, hoping to finish it off. It hit, but only inflicted 4 damage. This left the tank with 1 structure point and additional motive damage that immobilized the tank. Let's take a tactical pause here and let me briefly explain the strategy of both players. The Provisional Guard felt that they were winning the battle in the north, but slowly losing the battle in the south. However, what mattered most was who controlled the key terrain. Control Point C was firmly in the hands of House Corbin. The League just needed to hold the key terrain at the traffic circle and the admin building. To do this, the League player decided to reposition her southern forces back to the map's center. Then she would just need to hold on for 4 more turns. For House Corbin, the player's original strategy seems to be working. The Gunslinger's Recon Lance and the Bog Witches are distracting the enemy in the north, while the rest of the Gunslinger Company and House Corbin's forces punch through in the south, and then hook back north. But now that all 3 control points are key terrain, and Control Point C was under House Corbin's control, made the player want to tweak his original plan and focus on capturing the exposed traffic circle. But the player was worried about his northern flank. The unexpected aggressive tactics of the Provisional Guard has put the Bog Witches in a bad spot and could potentially be wiped out. The player didn't want an entire mercenary unit to be destroyed, but then if the Bog Witch's sacrifice can prevent the Support Star and the Hover Tank Star from getting into his backline, then that is what the Bog Witches will have to do. Let's get back to the ground battle. House Corbin won the initiative. The League will need to move and shoot first. Provisional Guard activates their Security Star, who pulls back to the farmhouse and fields. Next turn, they'll be able to move to a position to secure and hold the key terrain of the admin building. House Corbin activates the Bog Witches, who ground move back, staying in the lake water, but putting their backs to the woods. The League activates the Battle Tank Trinary. The von Luckner abandons his immobilized star mate and backs up across the road. The Behemoth Tank Star ground moves to the map center. The Hover Tank Star saw an opportunity and went for it. They ground moved from the lake onto the land, getting in behind the Recon Lance. The Hover Tanks have 2 objectives: sow chaos and hunt down House Corbin's heavy infantry. House Corbin activates the Heavy Mech Company. The Fire Lance repositions, staying in cover and keeping their TMM up. The Atlas Lance ground moves forward, with damaged Atlas lagging behind and staying in cover. The Rifleman Lance jumps into their new position. The damaged Rifleman jumps back into the cover of the neighborhood, while the other two jump forward. One lands in cover, and the other does a death from above attack on the immobilized von Luckner tank, crushing it. This destroyed the tank with a satisfying crunch, but it also caused 2 damage to the Rifleman. The Provisional Guard activates their Battle Mech Trinary. The strategy that the player discussed with me at the beginning of this turn is either evolving or was just tossed out the window. The player told me that she now feels she can isolate and destroy a few of House Corbin's lances before the Atlas and Rifleman Lance can become a big problem in the south. The player sends the support star wading into the lake, chasing after the Bog Witches. I guess the star feels that they can go toe-to-toe with the Riverine experts. The Battle Star moves to the other side of the admin building. From this position, they can put shots into the Fire Lance or the Gunslinger's Striker Lance. The Striker Star, in an attempt to overwhelm and destroy the Fire Lance, ground moves to the other side of the traffic circle, adding their firepower to the Behemoth Tank Star. House Corbin activates his Gunslinger Mercenary Company. The Recon Lance could either turn and try to deal with the Hover Tank Lance, or help the Bog Witches and move into position to engage the Support Star. In the end, the Recon Lance moved in to help their fellow mercenary brothers and sisters and surrounded the Support Star. The extremely damaged Iron Cheetah falls back into cover, while the rest of the Striker Lance also moved back into cover. The Command Lance continues to move through the neighborhood, so they can start pouring fire into the Behemoth tanks. They will assault the middle eventually, but first those tanks need to be dealt with. The League activates their Assault Infantry, and 2 of the squads leave the protection of the buildings and start moving to get closer to the key terrain. Remember, infantry gain more tactical points from capturing key terrain, but they have to be right next to the key terrain to do so, and the side with the most tactical points will win this battle. House Corbin activates his infantry company. The Battle Armor Infantry advance forward with 2 moving into the apartment buildings and occupying them, while the other 2 squads find cover in the ruins of the destroyed apartment building from the previous battle. The Mechanized Infantry group up and prepare to advance on Control Point C next turn. And with movement complete, we go into the shooting phase. The Provisional Guard of the League will shoot first. The Recon Lance intentionally exposed their rear arc to the Hover Tank Star, hoping to draw fire off the Bog Witches, but the player didn't fall for it. The League identified the Bog Witches as the bigger threat and wanted them destroyed. The Support Star and the Hover Tank Star split their fire between the 3 remaining Bog Witches, with target numbers ranging between 7 and 9. Using a whole lot of lucky points, the Viper and the Catapult were both destroyed. The Thunderbolt was left standing with only 2 structure points left, with critical damage to its fire control and weapons. Next, a few of the Behemoth battle tanks, the entire Striker Star, and the Battle Star take aim at 2 Stalkers in the open. Even the infantry took a few pot shots. The target number for the mech was a 7 and an 8 for the tanks and infantry. First thing to go was the building, which was destroyed by a few of the missed shots. Then the Stalker was destroyed, and the other took 8 points of damage. This took out all of its armor and scored 1 damage to the structure. However, the critical damage check was a 5, so no critical damage. And finally, the entire Security Star hiding in the tree line, as well as the last surviving member of the von Luckner tanks, opens fire on the riflemen that just crushed their allied tank. Target number was 8 for the mechs and a 7 for the tank. They hit with 9 damage, which was enough to blast the riflemen off their fallen comrade and destroy the mech. The Provisional Guard called in artillery on the severely damaged Iron Cheetah and nailed it, taking its last point of structure and destroying the mech. House Corbin can now return fire. The Bog Witches, before the mech sunk beneath the waves of the lake, and the Recon Lance open fire on the Support Star and destroy them all. Next up, the Battle Armor opened fire on one of the Behemoth tanks, causing 4 damage to its armor and damaged its motive for half movement. The Gunslinger's Striker and Command Lance, as well as the Heavy Mech Company's Fire Lance, and even a few of the Atlases opened fire on the Behemoth. In the end, 2 were destroyed. The rifleman took aim and fired at the von Luckner tank. The mech hit, dealing 4 damage to the tank's armor, but its motive check failed spectacularly and it was also immobilized. The House Corbin player simply remarked, "I guess it's crunch time." Seeing infantry in the open, House Corbin called an artillery strike and it nailed the infantry, destroying the unit. And this brings turn 3 to a close. House Corbin lost 5 mechs and the League lost 3 mechs, 3 tanks, and 1 infantry. To be honest, I didn't think this fight was going to be so brutal given the nature of my players, but here we are. Again, the battle is fought in the air. However, this is the last round for the air combat patrols, since both sides will need to pull back for fuel. And again, for the third time, House Corbin prevailed with a difference of 8. House Corbin's aerospace assets outmaneuvered the League's and were able to carry out a heavy strike against the immobilized von Luckner, hitting it with 5 damage, leaving the tank with 2 structure points and critical damage to its fire control. And with that, both combat air patrols disengage and return to base. Only having air assets for a maximum duration of 4 turns is a house rule, based solely on the personal tastes of the players. They like having battlefield support assets, they just don't want it to be the main focus of their battles. For your campaigns, feel free to set your rules how you like. I mean, it's your campaign. You're there to have fun, so have fun. Okay, back to the ground battle. House Corbin won the initiative yet again. The Provisional Guard of the League will need to move and shoot first. The Provisional Guard player was a little bummed about her blunder that caused the complete destruction of the support star. At the beginning of turn 3, she thought the north flank was hers for the taking, but by the end of turn 3, the north belonged to House Corbin. The only thing going for her was the hover tank star behind enemy lines. She could still move in and take out House Corbin's infantry or get behind the mechs and attack their rear arcs. What to do? What to do? She decided to leave her hover tanks in the enemy's rear and see what havoc they can make. The star ground moves into House Corbin's deployment zone, lining up her sights on either the infantry vehicles or the rear arcs of the Firelands. The behemoth tanks take the hold down action, using the destroyed mechs as cover. The von Luckner is immobilized, so, well, he's going nowhere. House Corbin activates his heavy infantry company. The 2 battle armor infantry squads jump to the top of the commerce building. They want to stay close to the key terrain of the traffic circle, but they also want the added protection of the building. The mechanized infantry finally can get into this fight. The deputies ground move towards the hover tanks and dismount their mechanized infantry, who are armed with dead fire missile launchers. The Provisional Guard activate her infantry company. One squad leaves their perch on the granary and moves toward the farmhouse. The other infantry squad hot-foots it across the road, getting into cover behind that wall. The one in the building holds position, waiting to engage a target. House Corbin activates his heavy mech company. The Firelands takes the hold down action, except for the Stalker, that moves forward into cover, using the building behind the mech to try to protect its rear arc from most of the hover tank star. The Atlas Lance ground moves forward, putting pressure on the south, but also getting inside of the behemoth tanks at the map center. The Provisional Guard player activates her battle mech trinary and positions the Striker Star to hold the container yard and keep the Bog Witch mech and Gunslinger Recon Lance from moving in. The Battle Star positions itself in cover to try and hold back the gunslingers and heavy mechs from taking the traffic circle. The last standing Bog Witch activates. The Thunderbolt jumps into cover of the woods, lining up its weapons on the hover tanks. The League activates her last unit, the Security Star. The Roken and Koshi move forward into cover, while the rest of the star takes the hold down action in the tree line. Finally, the gunslingers are activated. Old Gristle sends his Charger mech to the rear to deal with the hover tanks. The Crusader and Manteuffel tank take the hold down action. The Recon Lance simply needs to prevent the Striker Lance from breaching into the northern flank, so they wade into the water to use it as cover. The Command Lance of the Gunslingers moves into the tree line, bringing their weapons to bear to destroy anything in the traffic circle that's not waving the House Corbin flag. With movement complete, we go into the shooting phase. The League will shoot first. The von Luckner in the Security Star opens fire on the rifleman. Unfortunately, most of the shots were missed, destroying the house. But the rifleman was still hit, but it only sustained 6 damage to its armor. The assault infantry, the Battle Star, and the Behemoth tanks split their fire between the Gladiator and the Mad Cat. In the end, the Gladiator took 8 points of damage, which was enough to destroy it. The Mad Cat, on the other hand, was much luckier and only sustained 5 damage to its armor. Trying to take out as many mechs as possible, the Striker Star splits its fire between the Fireball and the Crab. Target number for the Fireball was 10 and a 9 for the Crab. In the end, the Fireball was destroyed. The Crab only took 5 damage. This took out all the mech's armor and just left 1 structure point left. Next up is the Hover Tank Star. The 2 Condors trying to take out the severely damaged Thunderbolt ignores the threatening Charger, rotates their turrets, and fire. The target number was an 8, and every single shot missed. The 3 Drillstons, also ignoring the clear and present danger of the mechanized infantry, opens fire on the rear arc of the Fafnir, and they hit with devastating damage. The mech received 8 points of damage to its rear arc, but a Fafnir is a well-armored mech and still has 2 armor points left. Provisional Guard called in danger close artillery strike on the dismounted mechanized infantry, and the squad was destroyed, but the infantry squad can still shoot back this turn. House Corpsmen can now return fire. The mechanized infantry, with support by fire from the deputies, made short work of 2 of the Drillson hover tanks. The Charger at close range and the Thunderbolt at medium range opened fire on one of the Condor heavy hover tanks and obliterated. The Recon Lance opens fire on the Peregrine with a target number of 8. They hit it with 5 damage, leaving the mech with just 1 structure point and critical damage to its engine. The 2 riflemen take aim at the Von Luckner tank with its tracks blown off. They open fire and destroy the immobilized tank. The rest of the gunslingers and heavy mech company, as well as the battle armor platoon, split their fire amongst the 3 behemoth tanks holding the center. Under all that firepower, all 3 of the tanks were destroyed. To finish off their shooting phase, House Corpsmen called in an artillery strike on the damaged Peregrine, but missed and blew up a stack of containers. And this brings turn 4 to a close. The Provisional Guard, and I quote the player, is in a tight spot. All the combat air patrols have returned to their bases for refueling. The behemoth tanks in the center were all destroyed. The hover tanks weren't as effective as the player had hoped. It just does not look good for the Provisional Guard. There were only 2 turns left in the battle, but it was becoming clear to the Provisional Guard that they didn't have much chance of winning the battle unless she's willing to sacrifice her entire battalion. For turn 5 and 6, the Provisional Guard decided to do a full retreat, every unit sprinting as hard as they could to escape the battle. By the end of turn 6, only the 2 hover tanks were unable to escape from the battlefield and were destroyed on the highway, just south of the traffic circle. House Corpsmen is victorious. The 2nd Regal Battalion of the 2nd Regiment, led by Old Gristle's gunslingers and the Bog Witches, have successfully pushed the League forces out of Whiteloft. What's left of the logistics hub is now controlled by House Corpsmen's forces, which will make it quite difficult for the League to continue an attack into the Hadzi Peninsula from the northwest. I hope you enjoyed the battle report. If you did, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. If you're curious about the terrain pieces or the campaign rules we use for the strategic level, check out the video's description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next battle report.